The dust settled on Main Street as Catherine Pierce stepped off the afternoon stage, her black dress stark against the orange glow of the setting sun. 3 months had passed since they buried her husband Samuel in the rocky soil outside Silver Ridge, and the whispers had already begun. A woman alone in the West was either prey or a problem, and Catherine had no intention of being either. She carried only one leather bag and a Winchester rifle that had belonged to her father. The hotel clerk's eyes widened when she walked through the door, but she met his stare with calm defiance. This town had taken everything from her. Now she had come to take something back. "I need a room," she said, placing $2 silver on the scarred wooden counter. The clerk, a thin man with nervous hands, cleared his throat. "We're mighty full up tonight. Cattlemen came through this morning." Catherine didn't move. She had learned that stillness could be more powerful than any raised voice. "Then I suppose you'll find me something." Before the clerk could respond, boots sounded on the stairs behind her. She turned to see a man descending, tall and lean, with the kind of face that had seen too much sun and not enough kindness. His hat was pulled low, but she could see the scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, a white line against weathered skin. "Give her my room," the stranger said, his voice like gravel scraping over stone. The clerk sputtered. "But Mr. Callahan, you paid for the week." "I said give her my room." The man called Callahan reached the bottom of the stairs and stood beside Catherine, not looking at her but through the window at the darkening street. "I'll find somewhere else." Catherine studied him carefully. In 3 months of widowhood, she had learned to read men the way card sharks read tells. This one was dangerous, but not to her. "Not yet, anyway." "That won't be necessary," she said. "I'm perfectly capable of sharing accommodations. It's just one night." Now Callahan turned to look at her, and his eyes were the color of a winter storm. Something flickered in them, surprise maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly." Catherine picked up her bag. "You're Jack Callahan. They say you rode with the Dalton gang until you found religion or conscience or whatever it is that makes killers stop killing. I'm Catherine Pierce. They say I poisoned my husband, though they can't prove it." She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "My room only has one bed, Mr. Callahan. Is that going to be a problem?" The hotel lobby had gone silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath. Callahan's jaw tightened, and for a moment Catherine wondered if she had pushed too hard, too fast. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. "That's perfect, Mrs. Pierce," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her skin prickle. Not fear exactly, but awareness. "Because I don't sleep much anyway." He took her bag before she could protest and headed up the stairs. Catherine followed, feeling the eyes of everyone in the lobby boring into her back. Let them talk. Let them wonder. She had come to Silver Ridge for one reason only, and it had nothing to do with propriety or reputation. The man who killed her husband walked free in this town, protected by money and power and the corrupt sheriff who took his gold. Samuel had been a good man, an honest man, and they had shot him in the back outside the Silver Star Saloon, then called it a fair fight. The judge ruled self-defense. The jury took less than an hour. But Catherine Pierce believed in a different kind of justice, the kind that didn't come from courtrooms. As she climbed those stairs behind Jack Callahan, she felt the weight of the derringer hidden in her corset, the blade strapped to her thigh, and the cold determination that had sustained her through 3 months of grief and planning. Tomorrow, she would find Thomas Blackwood and make him pay for what he had done. Tonight, she would share a room with the killer and hope that she had read him correctly. Because if Jack Callahan was even half the man the stories claimed, she was going to need him. The door closed behind them, and Catherine set down her rifle. Through the window, she could see the lights coming on in the Silver Star across the street. Somewhere in that building, Thomas Blackwood was drinking and laughing and living the life he had stolen from Samuel. "You can have the bed," Callahan said, pulling a blanket from the chest at the foot of the frame. "I meant what I said. I don't sleep much." Catherine removed her hat and met his eyes. "Good. Because we need to talk, Mr. Callahan. And you're going to want to be wide awake for what I have to say." Jack Callahan had survived 12 years in the outlaw trade by trusting his instincts, and right now every instinct he possessed was screaming that Catherine Pierce was trouble. The kind of trouble that got men killed or worse, got them thinking about things they had sworn off forever. He spread his blanket on the floor near the door, positioning himself between her and any threat that might come through. Old habits died hard, even for men trying to walk a straight path. "I know why you're here," he said, settling onto the hardwood. "Your husband got shot 6 weeks back. They called it self-defense, but everyone knows Thomas Blackwood murdered him. Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, her posture perfect despite the long journey. 2 months and 3 weeks. They buried him on a Tuesday. It rained. Her voice was steady, but he heard the steel beneath it. Tell me what you know about Blackwood. I know he's a snake who bought himself a town. Sheriff Morgan's on his payroll. Half the businessmen owe him money. The other half are too scared to cross him. Callahan pulled off his boots, keeping his gun belt within easy reach. I also know that walking into the Silver Star and shooting him would make you a murderer in the eyes of the law, no matter what he did to your husband. Who said anything about shooting him? Catherine stood and walked to the window, her silhouette sharp against the lamplight from the street. Samuel wasn't a violent man, Mr. Callahan. He was a teacher before we came west. He taught children to read and write, helped them see beyond the limited world of this dusty town. Blackwood killed him because Samuel discovered something worth dying for. Callahan sat up straighter. This wasn't the revenge story he had expected. What did he find? Documents. Deeds. Proof that Blackwood has been stealing land from homesteaders for the past 5 years, forging titles and bribing officials. Samuel was going to take it to the territorial governor. She turned to face him, and in the dim light her eyes looked ancient, weighted with grief and purpose. Blackwood shot him before he could send the papers. Then his men ransacked our house, looking for the evidence. But they didn't find it. No. Because Samuel gave it to someone he trusted days before he died. Someone Blackwood would never think to threaten. Catherine's smile was grim. The preacher's wife. Mrs. Sullivan has been keeping those documents hidden in her piano for 2 months, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. Callahan ran a hand over his face. This was worse than a simple revenge killing. This was politics and power, the kind of fight that destroyed everyone who touched it. So what do you need me for? Take the papers to the governor yourself. Because Sheriff Morgan has orders to arrest me the moment I try to leave town. Blackwood wants me close where he can watch me, make sure I don't cause trouble. He thinks I'm just a grieving widow, too broken to be dangerous. Her laugh was bitter. He's wrong about that. That still doesn't explain why you need a washed-up gunfighter. Catherine crossed the room and knelt beside him, close enough that he could smell lavender soap and determination. You're not washed up, Jack Callahan. You rode with the worst men in the territory and came out alive. You know how criminals think because you were one. And according to everything I've heard, you turned your back on that life because you still had a conscience buried somewhere under all that blood. He wanted to argue, to tell her she had the wrong man. But the truth was, she had him pegged. 3 years ago, he had watched his partner kill a store clerk during a robbery gone wrong, and something inside him had broken. Or maybe it had finally healed. Either way, he had walked away from the gang that night and never looked back. What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Pierce? I need those documents delivered to the territorial capital. But I also need justice for Samuel, and I need it in a way that matters. Blackwood has to face what he's done in front of this whole town. No more hiding behind corrupt sheriffs and bought judges. She reached into her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is my plan. Read it. Callahan unfolded the paper and read by the light of the moon streaming through the window. With each line, his eyebrows climbed higher. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and just crazy enough to work. It involved the territorial marshal who was due to pass through town in 5 days, a staged confrontation at the Silver Star, and Catherine herself as bait. This could get you killed, he said finally. I've been dead since the day they shot Samuel. I'm just waiting to see if I can take Blackwood with me. She took the paper back. So will you help me, or do I do this alone? Callahan knew what the smart answer was. Walk away. Ride out of Silver Ridge at dawn and never look back. Find some other town where the past didn't matter and the future looked clean. But when he looked at Catherine Pierce, he didn't see a widow bent on suicide. He saw a warrior preparing for battle, and something in him recognized her courage. Maybe even envied it. I'll help you, he said. But we do this my way. No unnecessary risks. No heroes. We get the evidence to the marshal, we expose Blackwood, and we both walk away alive. Deal? Catherine extended her hand. Deal. Her grip was firm and warm, and when she smiled, Callahan saw the woman she must have been before grief carved her into something harder. Morning came too fast and too bright. Callahan had spent the night watching Catherine sleep, not from any improper interest but from the simple need to understand what kind of woman could smile while planning to destroy a man like Thomas Blackwood. In sleep, her face softened, and he could see the weight she carried in the shadows under her eyes. She woke at dawn without alarm, immediately alert. "What's the first step?" "Breakfast," Callahan said, standing and stretching the stiffness from his back. "Can't fight on an empty stomach, and we need to be seen together. Let people talk. Let Blackwood wonder what you're planning." They descended to the hotel dining room where conversations stopped mid-sentence. Catherine walked with her head high, and Callahan had to admire her nerve. She knew every person in this room believed she had poisoned her husband, yet she moved through them like a queen among beggars. The waitress, a young woman with red hair and frightened eyes, took their order with shaking hands. Callahan recognized the fear. He had seen it before in towns controlled by men like Blackwood. "Mary," Catherine said softly, touching the girl's wrist. "How's your mother?" The waitress looked shocked that anyone had asked. "Not well. The medicine's expensive, and we're behind on rent." "Tell her I asked after her." Catherine pressed $2 into the girl's palm. "And that things are going to change soon." After Mary left, Callahan leaned forward. "You can't save everyone, Mrs. Pierce." "Maybe not. But I can try." She buttered her bread with precise movements. "Mary's mother has consumption. Blackwood owns their building and raised the rent when she got sick. Her husband disappeared last year, probably ran off. They're drowning, and no one helps because they are afraid. Fear's a powerful tool. So is hope." Catherine met his eyes. "That's what we're selling today, Mr. Callahan. Hope." After breakfast, they walked through town, and Callahan watched Catherine work. She stopped at the general store and bought supplies she didn't need, chatting with the owner about weather and crops. She visited the seamstress and ordered a new dress, black like all the others. She stood outside the schoolhouse where Samuel had taught and stared at the empty building until tears tracked down her cheeks. Every move was calculated. Every tear genuine but also purposeful. She was painting a picture of a grieving widow going about her life, harmless and broken. But Callahan saw the truth. She was mapping the town, counting allies and enemies, preparing the battlefield. By noon, they stood across from the Silver Star Saloon. Through the windows, Callahan could see Thomas Blackwood holding court at his usual table, surrounded by hired guns and sycophants. He was a big man, running to fat, with rings on every finger and a smile that never reached his eyes. "There he is," Catherine whispered. "The man who killed my husband and sleeps soundly every night." "Not for much longer." Callahan checked his pocket watch. "The preacher's wife expects you at 2. I'll create a distraction while you get the documents. Then we wait for the marshal." 5 days. Catherine's jaw tightened. "Can we stay hidden that long?" "We don't hide. We stay visible, act normal. I'm a drifter passing through. You're a widow settling your husband's affairs. Nothing suspicious." They turned away from the saloon, but not before Blackwood spotted them through the window. Callahan saw the moment of recognition, saw Blackwood's face darken with suspicion and something that might have been fear. Good. Let him wonder. That afternoon, while Callahan staged a loud argument with the blacksmith over a horseshoe, Catherine slipped into the church. Mrs. Sullivan was waiting with the documents hidden in her apron, and the two women embraced like sisters. "He's been asking about you," Mrs. Sullivan whispered. "Blackwood. He sent the sheriff to question me last week about whether Samuel gave me anything before he died. I lied, but I don't know how long I can keep doing this, Catherine. I'm not brave like you. You've been braver than anyone." Catherine took the documents, thick envelope heavy with damnation. "This ends soon. I promise." She tucked the papers into her bodice and left through the back door, slipping through the cemetery where Samuel's grave marker stood fresh and white. She placed her hand on the stone, feeling the sun-warmed granite beneath her palm. "Almost done, my love," she murmured. "Almost done." That evening, Callahan and Catherine ate dinner in tense silence. The documents were hidden beneath a loose floorboard in their room, and every footstep in the hallway made them both reach for their weapons. "Tell me about the Dalton gang," Catherine said suddenly. "Why did you ride with them?" Callahan considered lying, then decided she deserved truth. "I was young and angry. My family lost our ranch to a banker who forged documents and bribed judges. Sound familiar?" His smile was humorless. "I thought robbing and killing would make the anger go away. Took me 10 years to learn it just made me empty." "What changed?" "I watched my partner shoot a clerk who was begging for his life, pleading for his children. And I realized I had become exactly what I hated. A man who took from the weak and justified it with old wounds." He looked at his hands, scarred and weathered. I walked away that night. Been trying to walk straight ever since. Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. Then help me walk straight too. Help me do this the right way. I will, he promised. And meant it. 3 days passed like years. Callahan and Catherine maintained their routine, visible but unremarkable, while beneath the surface tensions coiled tighter. Blackwood's men watched them constantly, and Sheriff Morgan made pointed visits to their hotel, each time with thinly veiled threats disguised as concern for Catherine's welfare. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Callahan was shaving in their shared room when he heard boots on the stairs, too many and too fast. He grabbed his gun belt and positioned himself beside the door just as someone knocked hard enough to rattle the frame. Mrs. Pierce. Sheriff Morgan's voice carried ugly satisfaction. Open up. We need to have a conversation. Catherine emerged from behind the changing screen, fully dressed and calm as still water. She nodded to Callahan, who opened the door with his hand on his pistol. Morgan stood flanked by 2 deputies, both young and nervous. The sheriff's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Mrs. Pierce, there's been an accusation. Thomas Blackwood claims you've been making threats against his life. That's absurd. Catherine's voice never wavered. I've barely spoken to Mr. Blackwood since my husband's funeral. Nevertheless, his concern for his safety. Given the rumors about how your husband died, Morgan let the implication hang heavy in the air. I'm afraid I need to take you in for questioning. On what charges? Callahan stepped forward, putting himself between Catherine and the lawmen. Who the hell are you? Morgan's hand drifted toward his gun. A concerned citizen. You can't arrest someone without charges. I can do whatever I damn well please in my town. Morgan's face flushed red. Now step aside, or I'll arrest you for interfering with the law. Callahan calculated odds and angles. 3 against 1, and any shooting would bring more deputies. Catherine touched his shoulder, a gentle pressure that said stand down. She had more sense than he did right now, letting rage cloud judgment. I'll go peacefully, she said. Mr. Callahan, please send word to Mrs. Sullivan that I may miss our afternoon visit. The message was clear. Mrs. Sullivan needed to protect the documents. Callahan nodded once, forced to watch as they led Catherine down the stairs and into the bright morning sunlight. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion, and he saw their faces. Some showed pity. Most showed the ugly satisfaction of seeing someone brought low. The moment they disappeared around the corner, Callahan moved. He went straight to the church and found Mrs. Sullivan arranging flowers on the altar. They took her, he said without preamble. Blackwood's making his move early. We need to accelerate the plan. Mrs. Sullivan's hands trembled, scattering rose petals across the floor. The marshal isn't due until tomorrow. What can we do? We improvise. Callahan's mind raced through possibilities and discarded most of them. Where's your husband? Making calls on the sick. He won't be back until evening. Good. I need you to do something dangerous. Can you get a message to the telegraph office without being seen? Through the back alleys, yes. What do I send? Callahan wrote quickly on a piece of paper torn from the hymnal. Send this to the territorial marshal. Tell him we have evidence of corruption in Silver Ridge and that a woman's life is in danger. Ask him to come immediately and bring backup. Mrs. Sullivan read the message, her face pale but determined. And Catherine? I'm going to get her out of that jail before Blackwood decides she's more dangerous alive than dead. He checked his pistol, counting bullets. Can I trust your husband to back me if things go wrong? Reverend Sullivan may preach peace, but he fought in the war. He knows sometimes you have to stand against evil. She gripped Callahan's arm. Bring her back safe. That's the plan. The Silver Ridge jail was a small building behind the sheriff's office, 3 cells and a desk. Callahan approached from the back, moving through the alleys with the practiced stealth of his outlaw days. Through a barred window, he could see Catherine sitting calmly in a cell, her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for tea instead of facing potential murder. The back door was locked, but locks had never stopped him before. He worked quietly with picks he kept hidden in his boot, feeling the tumblers click into place. The door swung open on silent hinges, and he slipped inside. Catherine looked up, showing no surprise. I wondered if you'd come. Can't let you have all the fun. He worked on the cell lock, this one simpler than the door. Morgan and his deputies went to report to Blackwood at the saloon. I heard them say I'd be taken care of after dark. Her smile was grim. I believe that means killed while attempting escape. Then we don't give them the chance. The lock clicked open. Let's go. They were halfway to the back door when it burst open and Sheriff Morgan stood there with a shotgun leveled at Callahan's chest. Knew you'd try something stupid, Morgan said. Blackwood said you were too sweet on her to let it go. Callahan raised his hands slowly, mind working through scenarios. This is illegal detention, Sheriff. You know it. I know it. And come tomorrow, the territorial marshal will know it too. Morgan's laugh was harsh. The marshal takes bribes same as everyone else. You think you're the first fool to try exposing Blackwood? He owns this whole territory. He gestured with the shotgun. Back in the cell, both of you. Make it easy, and I'll make your deaths quick. No. Catherine's voice cut through the tension. I won't die in a cell like an animal. She moved faster than Callahan expected, throwing herself sideways as her hand came up with the derringer he hadn't known she was carrying. The small pistol cracked once, loud in the confined space. Morgan's shotgun discharged into the ceiling as he fell backward, clutching his shoulder. Callahan lunged forward, disarming the sheriff and knocking him cold with a single punch. He stood over the unconscious man, breathing hard, and turned to Catherine. You said no unnecessary risks. That was necessary. She lowered the derringer, her hand steady despite having just shot a man. Now we run. They ran through Silver Ridge as the sun began its descent, painting the dusty streets blood red. Behind them, shouts rose as someone discovered the fallen sheriff. Ahead, the church steeple reached toward darkening sky like a promise or a prayer. Reverend Sullivan met them at the door, his weathered face set with determination. The marshal received the telegram. He's riding through the night with deputies. They'll be here by dawn. He ushered them inside quickly. But half the town is looking for you now. Blackwood's offering $100 for information. Callahan barred the door and checked his ammunition. 4 bullets left in his pistol, 2 in Catherine's derringer, and the Winchester rifle she had retrieved from their hotel room. Not enough if it came to a real fight. We just need to survive until morning, Catherine said, reading his thoughts. She positioned herself at a window overlooking the street, the rifle comfortable in her hands. My father taught me to shoot before I could read. Samuel hated guns, but he never asked me to give them up. Darkness fell like a curtain, and with it came the mob. Callahan watched from the second-floor window as men gathered with torches and weapons, their faces twisted into masks of righteous anger. Blackwood stood among them, directing operations with calm efficiency. Callahan. His voice carried clearly in the night air. Send out Mrs. Pierce, and I'll let you ride out of here alive. You got no stake in this fight. Callahan opened the window. Can't do that, Blackwood. See, I've developed a conscience. Turns out they're contagious. Then you'll die with her. Blackwood gestured, and men moved to surround the church. Last chance. Talk's cheap, Callahan called back. Let's see if your hired guns are willing to die for your money. The first shot shattered a window to his left. Callahan dropped and returned fire, not aiming to kill but to dissuade. Below, men scattered, seeking cover. This was going to be a long night. For 3 hours, they held the church. Reverend Sullivan moved between windows, his old military training evident in the way he conserved ammunition and chose targets. Mrs. Sullivan loaded weapons and tended minor wounds, her hands steady despite the chaos. Catherine fought with cold precision, each shot calculated for maximum effect. Callahan found himself grateful she was on his side. Around midnight, Blackwood tried a new tactic. Burn them out. He ordered. Men approached with torches, and Callahan's heart sank. The old wooden church would go up like kindling. Then hoofbeats thundered down Main Street, and a voice rang out with the authority of federal law. This is Marshal Hastings. Put down your weapons. The territorial marshal arrived with 6 deputies, all armed with rifles and the power of legitimate authority. The mob hesitated, torches wavering. Blackwood's face went white as he saw his control crumbling. Marshal Hastings, Catherine called from the church. I have evidence of land fraud and murder. Thomas Blackwood killed my husband to hide his crimes. She emerged from the church, the documents held high, and walked through the crowd like a prophet carrying tablets of law. Men parted before her, and in the torchlight she looked like an avenging angel carved from grief and determination. Marshal Hastings took the documents and read by lantern light, his face growing harder with each page. When he looked up, his eyes found Blackwood. Thomas Blackwood, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and murder. Anyone interferes, they'll hang beside him. Blackwood tried to run. Made it 3 steps before Callahan clotheslined him, sending the big man sprawling in the dust. It felt good, righteous even, watching the tyrant fall. The deputies took Blackwood into custody along with Sheriff Morgan, who had regained consciousness but not his courage. The mob dispersed quickly once their leader was shackled. Cowards always scattered when the strong fell. Marshal Hastings approached Catherine. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband was brave to gather this evidence. These documents will hang Blackwood and expose corruption throughout the territory." "Samuel was the bravest man I knew," Catherine said softly. "He just wanted justice. Now he has it." Dawn broke clear and bright, washing away the smoke and blood of the long night. Callahan stood with Catherine on the church steps, watching the marshal's wagon carry Blackwood toward territorial prison and the gallows that waited there. "What will you do now?" Callahan asked. Catherine looked at the town spread before them, freed from tyranny but still wounded. "Rebuild. Samuel started a school here. I'll finish it. Teach children that courage matters more than gold, that justice is worth fighting for." She turned to him. "And you?" Callahan had thought about leaving, riding to some new town where the past couldn't find him. But looking at Catherine, seeing the light returning to her eyes, he realized he was tired of running. "Thought I might stay a while. Town could use a good blacksmith, and I learned the trade before I learned to rob banks." He smiled, genuine for the first time in years. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't get yourself killed rebuilding this place." "Jack Callahan, are you proposing to help me?" "Just returning the favor, Mrs. Pierce. You saved my soul last night. Least I can do is help you save a town." She laughed, clear and bright, the sound of grief beginning to heal. They stood together as the sun rose higher, painting Silver Ridge in shades of gold and promise. The road ahead would be hard, scarred by loss and struggle. But for the first time since Samuel's death, Catherine felt hope kindle in her chest. That night in the hotel, when Callahan had said his room only had one bed, she had smiled because she understood. Sometimes you had to share the darkness with someone before you could find the light together. They had walked through fire and come out tempered, stronger for the burning. The town bell rang, calling people to worship, to witness the new day. Catherine and Jack descended the church steps side by side, two broken people who had fought their way back to whole. Behind them, Reverend Sullivan's voice rose in prayer, thanking God for justice and mercy. The West was wild and hard, full of violence and loss. But it was also a place where people could remake themselves, where widows could become warriors and outlaws could find redemption. As they walked down Main Street, heads held high, the townspeople watched with new respect. The widow and the gunfighter had saved Silver Ridge. Now they would help it heal. Samuel Pierce could rest easy in his grave. His death had not been in vain. And Catherine, carrying his memory like a torch against the darkness, would make sure his legacy lived on in every child who learned to read, every homesteader who kept their land, every person who chose courage over fear. The story would be told for years afterward, how a widow and a reformed outlaw stood against corruption and won. They would leave out some details, romanticize others, until truth became legend. But Catherine and Jack would remember the reality, the fear, the blood, the long night in the church not knowing if they would see dawn. They would remember because those memories were sacred, bought with pain and paid for with courage. And when years later, they stood together at the dedication of the Samuel Pierce School for Children, watching students flood through the doors hungry for knowledge, they would know that every struggle had been worth it. Justice had been served. Love had been honored. And in the wild, unforgiving West, two souls had found purpose in the ruins of their past. The cowboy had said his room only had one bed. The widow had smiled and said that was perfect. Because sometimes the best partnerships began with shared darkness and trust, with two people too stubborn to quit and too brave to run. Silver Ridge would never forget them. And they would never forget the night they stood together against the darkness and won.